Jazz. So let's talk about trade value too, though, since it is trade season.
Yeah, I
Let's
want to
talk
dive
about
into
the
that for
roster,
sure.
man.
hmm
All
I
right.
think that the trade market has opened up, as you know, and I do think that the Jazz are open for business on this one. I think that we keep hearing trade scenarios go on, for a lot of players on the team that we initially didn't even think that they would be on the trade market. We've heard
Mhm.
sources say that John Collins is on the trade block, and I've even heard sources that say that despite any player, no player is untouchable. If you get the right trade, right scenario, Danny Ainge might pull the trigger. And so we wanted to kind of look at some of these trade values and, see how valuable some of these guys might be in a trade scenario. But, as well as doing that, we want to see how likely it might be as well. But you want to start us off? What do you think about Taylor Hendricks? Do you think that he is somebody that the Jazz might want to trade during this trade season?
No, absolutely not. Um, with that said, his trade value is incredibly high, in my opinion, because he's a rookie and he has great
Yeah.
length. Great length. He has a 7-foot wingspan, incredible defensive instincts, especially off the side block. And he can shoot very consistently at 3. I think he has very high trade value. But I would not, if I was the Utah Jazz, I wouldn't be trying to trade him or any of my younger pieces. So in terms of
Yeah, I
trade
think I'm
value,
on
do
that
we want
boat.
to run this off trade value?
Yeah, we're running it off of trade value.
All
So,
right. For
like,
me,
how
Taylor
valuable
Hendricks
do you think
is
this guy is?
definitely a B. Definitely.
A B tier?
Oh yeah, because he's a young power forward, length, size, athleticism. He can move. That's a great pass right there. He would be a great pickup.
I've also heard that somebody was trying to get Taylor Hendricks, like some teams looked interested. I think even at the start of the year, and there were some good pieces that they wanted to give up for Hendricks, but the Jazz weren't willing to.
Mhm.
And, he's a rookie. He's still getting his head in the game, but I think that we've seen some really good things come from him so far. Like, we've seen some incredible defense, which, you always love to see. But
I do.
I think
I love my
that
defense.
he is somebody that, you could get some decent pieces from him. And I think he's going to turn into a pretty decent player. So I think the B tier fits pretty nicely. What do we think of Fontecchio? Now, I think he is going to be a sought after piece, but that's just me. What do you think?
I think for making salaries work, yeah. Depending on what the Jazz are trying to trade. He's a pretty solid defender and he's a good 3-point shooter. So and he's been a professional for years. He was playing since he was 16 years old in Italy or something. So he is not a rookie in that sense. He's a legit veteran, very much Ricky Rubio, who had been playing pro ball since he was 15. So I like players like that. I think that he would also be around to be, just because he is a solid defender. He could be used to make salaries work because he's on a very cheap deal and he is a pretty good 3-point shooter. What about you?
Okay. I would put him as high as the A tier, and here's why.
Okay.
I don't think this guy's a superstar, I'm basing this off of the value that he could bring to a contender.
Right.
Now, when you put him, on an off role, like maybe a guy who's just sitting in the corner or coming off screens taking threes, he shoots fairly well. And we're seeing that these past 9 or 10 games, even when he's starting, he gives a ton of effort on every play, and that can be contagious for a team. It's been contagious for the Jazz as well. But he's been put on guys who are the number one options for the Jazz. I find this very interesting. When we played against the New Orleans Pelicans only a few weeks ago, I think the Jazz went 2-0 on them, and Rene Fontecchio was guarding Ingram both of those games, and Ingram struggled. And we saw that again on some of the other games as well. So the Jazz obviously think that he is a competent defender. Not only that, he's got size. He's something like 6'8". He can shoot the lights out on the three. He kind of reminds me of, somebody like a Duncan Robinson. Maybe not as good, but much more in value in terms of contract. You know, you put him on a contender or you have somebody like a Giannis, somebody like a Damian Lillard, and then you just put him on the side where he's going to have free reign. I think that this guy could shoot the lights out, you know,
Oh
and he
yeah.
makes smart plays. You know, he's a veteran. He's something like 28 years old. Like you said before, he played a lot of years not in the NBA. And so he knows what he's doing. He's a smart player, and he's really showing forth like why the Utah Jazz wanted to get him, you know, what the Utah Jazz were hoping out of him. Unfortunately, I just don't know if he's really going to fit the timeline of the Jazz, because I just think that it's still going to take a lot of time for the Jazz to be good, you know, be good enough to be a contender. And this guy is fit to be on a contending team. And so I would put him in the A tier. I think that people are going to be asking for him. What do you think? Is that a fair assessment, or should we leave him in B?
No, put him in A. Put him in A.
Yeah.
Because like, those are valid points. Like if you put that guy on Golden State, if you put that guy in Miami, like he's going to contribute as a good defender and a great 3-point shooter. And he does. He plays his heart out, man. He's a savvy veteran on like a really good deal. I think that's a fair assessment.
Looking at Walker Kessler, I mean, we consider him generally as an untouchable. He's young. He is still developing. We saw a great rookie year from him. You know, he was blocker Kessler for the Utah Jazz. He's having a bit of a sophomore slump. However, you could attribute that to his injury with the Kings and coming back, and maybe he's in a bit of a funk, but he's also shown that he's still the same guy in certain aspects. Like he's a very good defender, gets a lot of blocks. Like we just saw him almost get a triple-double a few games ago. And so the reason why we have him here, though, is that I've heard from some sources that, you know, this guy isn't necessarily untouchable. And it goes for all of these guys, all the Utah Jazz players. So if you get the right piece, you know, what kind of value do you think Walker Kessler brings to the table, and how likely do you think that they would trade him?
I think it's highly unlikely that the Utah Jazz will be parting ways with Walker Kessler, Lauri Markkanen, Ochai Agbaji, Keontae George, or Taylor Hendricks. I think those 5 guys, you would really have to sweeten the pot for the Jazz to be like, okay, yeah, sure. I think those are the guys who are least likely to move. With that said, I like inversely, those are the guys, in my opinion, who have the highest trade value. If you were to get Walker Kessler, I mean, that's an S tier to me, honestly, because of the fact that he is a defensive beast. He's in his second year in the league. He has good offensive capabilities that are still developing. He works hard. He doesn't care if he is starting or coming off the bench. He's a tough player. And I mean, we just saw him go for 7 blocks in 25 minutes. That's already his first 7-block game of the year. And I think he's going to have more. He's a fantastic rim protector who's just going to get better. And that's why I think the Jazz don't want to part with him. Why would you? When you have a rookie who can generate that kind of defense for you, like, you want to hold on to him.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good point. Well, what are your thoughts on some of these guards, like Clarkson, THT, Ochai, Sexton, and George? Where do you think they all fall?
Well, I think THT would be a C in terms of like playing value, but because of his expiring deal, you could argue like, oh, well, maybe he's a B, because if you don't like him, he can just drop off your books. That's 11 million. And if you're a team that's above the second apron, that's saving you that saves you almost $30 million, close to it. Jordan Clarkson, he's having kind of a down year, but he still was 6th man of the year. He knows who he is. He could be a B tier, in my opinion, because he signed a really friendly contract with the Jazz where they front loaded him. I think he makes $22 million or something like that this year, and then it drops off every year after that. Really, really friendly deal. And we all know what he can do when he comes off the bench and he's Jordan Clarkson. Like he'll light the arena on fire, man. And I still think he's that player. I just think we're all trying to develop in this new system with Will Hardy, and I think that'll take time. I don't think that's on him as a player. Ochai, he's a good defender outside of that. Like, he's kind of struggling to find out who he is. I think he could also be a C tier. As much as I love him as a defender, because I do, like, this kid is probably the most athletic guy on our team right now. Our team's incredible. Like, some of his chase down blocks are so much fun to watch, and he plays hard. He's still a rookie. Like, we're just not getting really any offensive production from him. And you know, this is an offensive league. You have to contribute a little bit. I don't think John Collins has any trade value right now. I think he's a D.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that it's very damaging when reports come out saying that your front office is frustrated with the player and you're trying to trade him again after you haven't had him for even it's been like 20 games. Like, that's not a good look. And like, his numbers are reflecting that he's not worth the 25 million over the course of the next. No, it's 77 million over the next 3 years. That's what he's still owed. You know, so a little over 25 a year. He's just not giving that kind of production. So, and I like Collins too. I think he's a hell of a rebounder. I think that he's super competitive. He's still high energy. But when those reports came out, like, he was on the trade block for so long, man, with the Hawks. We picked him up for virtually nothing. And then reports come out that we want to trade him. Like, we're just not going to be able to. He doesn't have any trade value. Look, if Zach LaVine doesn't have any trade value, why should we think John Collins has any trade value right now?
Well, I think LaVine has some trade value, and I think we're going to see either LaVine or DeRozan be traded at the deadline. But I think I'm going to counter-argue this one, Doc. I think that Collins has a little bit of value. I think that the reason he had zero value beforehand was he was coming off that finger injury, and I'm sure that people have seen the images of how big his finger got, and it affected his shooting, and he didn't shoot well this previous season. But I think he has been Mr. Consistent almost for the Utah Jazz, averaging around 15 points, shooting pretty decently as well, something like 45 field goal, about 38, 39 from three. And he's been very clutch at the end of games, shooting at the three as well. So
yeah,
I think that if you put him, I was going to say, if you put him on a team where there's a really good pick and roll point guard, somebody who, could be rolling, somebody like a Luka Doncic. And you know what? As crazy as this sounds, people like to complain about how Trae Young and him didn't work, but they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. They were able to do it with that constructed team, and he was one of the primary options. And I think that he could turn into that again. He's still a young guy. He's something like 26, and it is definitely a killer. Like, I agree with you in terms of trying to trade him. It is going to kill his value just saying how the Jazz are upset with how he's been both offense and defense, which he really has. I mean, he's
a kicker, man. It's like, I'm not
the thing that bothers
player. He is consistent.
Why would the Utah Jazz do that? Like, if you want to trade the guy, don't say something like that or leak that.
I was shocked that Andy Larson reported that from the Salt Lake Tribune. I was like,
it's so goofy. We can put him in here.
Collins has been playing really well for us. I agree. I just don't think he's going to have any trade value when a story like that comes out. Another example is, like, let's just talk about Josh Giddey for a second and the allegations. Okay. Josh Giddey is a really good player, but like, with everything that just came out, like, that dude is not he's not gonna have trade value based off of the stories and allegations that came out. In my opinion, Collins is a really solid player. I agree with you. I like the way he's been playing, dude. I think he's been playing really solid for us. Like, I've been enjoying watching.
People give him a lot of flack, and like, I hear a lot of people say, stuff like, well, he hasn't really made any impact when he's on the court, which, we're as bad as we were at the second half of the season, even after acquiring him. And so one could argue, well, he's not making this huge of an impact. But like, you have to remember as well that we have added some rookies to the team, like Keontae George, and Jordan Clarkson has been probably the worst iteration of Jordan Clarkson we've ever seen since the beginning of his career. He's shooting poor, and like I don't think Clarkson, like, you put Clarkson at the B tier, and I guess you can argue that having him in a sixth man role is going to relieve a little bit of his shooting percentage. He's going to be able to kind of be the guy that he once was for the Utah Jazz when he was in that sixth man role. But I would argue that the guy has just been the absolute worst for the Utah Jazz. I would never, if I was another organization, I would never pick him up. He has been just like, he seems like he has an attitude problem. He seems like when he is off the court, the Jazz are better in every aspect. He is literally, in my opinion, he is the worst. In my opinion, he is the worst player in the NBA right now. The literal worst player in the NBA. There is no one worse than Jordan Clarkson. And here's why. For the amount that he shoots, for the amount that he shoots, he is one of the most poor field goal percentages in the NBA. He averages 3 turnovers. He has an attitude problem. He doesn't play defense. Like, for the Utah Jazz, and you could argue on a different team, he might be performing better. We've seen that. When somebody gets traded, they end up performing a little bit better. But Jordan Clarkson should not be playing for the Utah Jazz. You should put him in the G League. You should have him just sit on the bench for the rest of the year. With how bad he has been, the Jazz look way better without him. And whenever he's on the court, he shoots poorly. He doesn't really he passes a little bit, but he turns the ball over. He doesn't play defense. He makes the Jazz worse. So why would an organization even want him?
The ball over currently. That's not just a JC problem. That's just a Utah Jazz
I think he's the highest rated turnover for the Jazz, though. And I think that he just is a bad attitude guy. Like, it looks like he complains. He looks like he doesn't want to be there. Like,
it's just
you're telling me that he's injured
because we're getting whooped all the time. I'd be frustrated too. I totally understand.
You're telling me he's injured right now for another 2 weeks? You really think he's injured? Like that. Because I don't. Well, no, he's not injured. They're just done with him, and they're trying to trade him right now. He has been so bad for the Jazz that he's quote unquote been injured for the past month. Yeah, I don't buy that for a second.
That's fair. Okay, we're gonna find out soon. What about I love your JC take. I don't agree with it, but I love it. All right, what about Larry Marketing? This one is like a no-brainer, right?
Larry is the most coveted piece on the Jazz. I think that
the least likely
a lot of teams have been interested in him, just about what we've talked about, him being a great option for any team. He's an off-ball guy. He's going to make any team better. And he can really explode. Like you were saying, Doc, a lot on our pods is towards the back half of the year, he was averaging something like 28 points per game, 9 rebounds. And he was shooting very well.
5 games of last year, he averaged 28 and 9, dude.
Like, he's an obvious S tier in my opinion. Now, do I think the Jazz will trade him? This is where it gets a little bit tricky. I think that the Jazz generally won't trade him, but I don't think that any of these guys are untouchable. And here's the thing. We've heard that before. We've heard that with Donovan Mitchell. I remember when Donovan Mitchell was an absolute untouchable. And then we started to hear things like, well, if the right trade pieces come along, maybe he will be traded. And then sure enough, Donovan Mitchell got traded. And so I'm not saying he's getting traded, but I'm saying that there is a chance
he will be.
That's what I thought about Donovan.
Yeah, but we also knew after that year that when we brought in Danny Ainge, she was tearing everything down to the studs, man. It started with Ingles, and then we lost Rudy Gobert. No, it's Royce O'Neal. He was first, then Joe Ingles, and then Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell, Bojan, Conley. The only guy left is Jordan Clarkson, but we knew that Danny Ainge was ripping this thing down, man. Okay, what about KO?
I think KO has a high. I think he's a coveted piece as well, and
I
we've
do
kind
too.
of dove into this a little bit as well earlier
I do
on in the
too.
pod. But Kelly Olynyk is a good facilitator. He
Mhm.
can rebound the ball. He's not the best in defense, but he's a good locker room guy. He passes the ball. He shoots well. He's good to have on a contender. He's probably good to have on any team. I think that he might be moved. I think he's likely to be moved. I would put him in the A tier.
I
What do you
agree.
think about that?
I agree, especially with his expiring contract. Like 12 million off
And
the books, or you can decide to keep him if he fits. That's always a win-win for any team. He has a ton of trade value. Tons of
how
trade
likely do you
value.
think it is? You think he's
Um,
gone by the trade deadline?
I think he could be, yeah. I think that he is one of the more probable pieces that the Jazz are going to be like kind of dangling. I don't
Mhm.
think. I think him. I think Colin Sexton, which hurts me to say. I love Colin. I think Jordan Clarkson and Taylor and Horton Tucker are all pieces the Jazz are going to try to shop around.
I think I might put Sexton in the B tier and George in the A tier. Although I think George is
I
the
think
most
George
untouchable
is
out
an
of all
S
of these guys.
tier.
George and Hendricks.
Yeah, I think he's an S tier in terms of trade value. Like, I really
George
think.
is?
Yeah, George. Like those three pieces right there are the most valuable pieces the Jazz have. Like in terms of trades, absolutely.
I do think Colin Sexton has raised his value quite a bit. These past few games, he's shown that he can still shoot the ball lights out when he starts,
I'm
and
really
he's been
proud of him.
shooting at a very high clip. I think the
I'm
past 4
super.
games, he's had over 20 points.
Yeah, I'm super proud of him right now because like this, it feels like he's finally starting to like settle down into like what Coach Hardy wants him to do. He's looked great for us, man. I'm so proud of Collins, dude. Even with the loss last night, like this guy still plays hard. He plays hard all the time. Like he's just he's at 100 miles per hour, like all the. I'm pretty sure that's how he brushes his teeth, man. It's 100 miles per hour. This dude is just an engine, man. The young bull
Mhm.
is really looking great. And I think he would like once again, he's one of those guys who can just contribute to whatever team he goes to automatically because he knows how to score and he can play good defense and he has a lot of energy and he's very athletic. You can put him anywhere and he's going to help boost the team's capabilities.
Well, I would say, Doc, out of all of these guys, the least likely to get traded on here are likely Ochai, Taylor Hendricks, Keontae George, and Walker Kessler. And then I would say potential trades would be, Sexton, THT, Collins, and I don't think really Lowry, but, like I keep hearing stuff, and where there's smoke, there's fire. And then likely trades, in my opinion, Simone Fontecchio, Kelly Olynyk, Jordan Clarkson.
Okay. I like that. I like that a lot. Guys, remember to like the video too, because that's how we're going to grow. So, and we can't grow without you guys. JD, I think that's a pretty fair assessment. I think all the young dudes, George, Kessler, I don't think Ochai is going anywhere. I don't think Hendricks is going to go anywhere. And I don't think Lowry is either, personally. But with that said, we also know that Danny Ainge is a businessman. And if someone offers him the right price for players, he's probably going to take it. That's just how he operates. That's how he built a championship team in Boston. So I could see him doing that again with the right price for Lowry. With that said, should we look at some of the trades we found on Fanspo for Lowry?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, guys.
Look here.
JD and I are going to look at the NBA Trade Machine website, Fanspo, where basically anyone can try to simulate mock trades. And like right now, look at that. Larry Marketing is currently the highest trending player on this website. So let's take a look at some of these, and we're going to give you guys our assessment of if these are realistic, if the Jazz would even look at these, or like what's going on with some of them.
Yeah, I mean, he's number 1 on trending. You take a look. The number 1 that we're seeing here is Lowry Markkanen to the Heat.
Look at
for
this.
Duncan Robinson, Nikola Jovic, and 2 first rounds. What do you think of this, Doc?
I think this was obviously made by a Heat fan, like a Heat fan. So no, there's no way the Jazz are going to do this. Duncan Robinson is not out. He's underperforming for the amount of money he's getting. He was coming off. The only reason he was playing in the playoffs last year is because Hero got hurt. Like, they effectively benched this guy. Why would we want to have to pay him $18 million for the next 3 years? No, thank you. Nikola Jovic is a good player. Still, no, thank you. And the Heat, their draft picks always suck. Like, they have an incredible front office because they know how to find guys really well that fit into their Heat culture, but they're always somewhere in the 20s. I don't want these picks. No way. No way I'd do this.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think 2 first rounds, in my opinion, I think that you could get some value out of first round picks. And if Danny Ainge is trying to implode the team once again and, keep stocking up on the draft picks, 2 first rounds is not bad, including some other players. And with Nikola Jovic, there's potential that this guy could turn out pretty decent. However, you're right. The 2027 and 2029, those are years away. Those are probably years where the Jazz don't necessarily want to be tanking any further. We won't have a need for those draft picks necessarily. We already have 2 or 3 draft picks in 2027. Jazz will want to, if the Jazz want to be contenders, they need to stop looking at the draft 5 years from now. They want to look at the draft right now. They want to try and acquire players right now, not 5 to 7 years from now. Yeah. And so I think this is a little bit silly. If I saw this, I'd lose my marbles as a Utah Jazz fan. It only looks good for the Heat, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, we're not doing that. No way. All right, let's look at another one. Okay, let's see what we get. So we give up Lauri Markkanen, Chris Dunn, and it looks like we swap our 2025 so we can get TJ McConnell, Obi Toppin, and Jalen Smith. Nah, man. Give me Benedict Mathurin. I want Benedict Mathurin in this trade. We're going to keep the most favorable of our 2025 because it's most likely going to be either us or potentially the Cavs, depending on how all those injuries worked out or are going to work out, what they're going to do. They're 2024, they're 2026. It's not bad getting 2, but I don't like the fact that we're giving them stuff. Why are we giving them our most favorable pick when they're giving us virtually nothing in return? They would have to give us Benedict Mathurin. He would have to be on the table, or there's no way I would even look at this.
Yeah, and you have to consider the fact that the Pacers are on the up and up too. If they were to get Lauri Markkanen, he would be a great piece. Just another piece that they would acquire with Tyrese Halliburton. And are these first round picks really going to be that good? They're probably going to be 18 to 30. Probably in the 20 to 30s for first rounds. Do we really want 2 guys that would be 22nd to 24th for Lauri Markkanen, who's still young, who's still growing, and a potential great player?
Favorable, which is probably a lottery pick in 2025. So we're giving them a lottery pick and Lauri Markkanen, and then we're getting their scraps. No thanks. Put Benedict Mathurin on the table, or get.
You got to give us more young guys with a lot of potential, I think.
Yeah, kick rocks on that. No way.
I know this looks good for the Pacers, bad for the Jazz.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll look at one more. What do you think of this one? A triple win trade. Lowry to New York.
Okay. So we send Lowry KO. The Hawks get Barrett and McBride. We get Hunter, AJ Griffin, and 3 first rounders.
3 first rounds.
No, I don't want Hunter. He's $20 million for 4 years. I don't want that because
he's been playing pretty well this year.
I know. I don't want to pay a guy for 4 years like that. No way. Only
and AJ Griffin has looked pretty good as well.
Yeah, I still wouldn't do this. I don't think this helps our team. We just get more draft capital, and honestly, those picks aren't going to be very valuable. We're talking about Lauri Markkanen here, who is a guaranteed second option on a contending team. That's what he can be. And he can develop even more. Like, this isn't going to work for me.
Doc, of these three trades that we've kind of looked at, I think this one would be the best for the Jazz. The other two are just like straight up pipe dreams. This one too is not the best for the Jazz,
But it's
and I
better
don't
than
think
the
I
other
would do it
two.
either. However, if you're looking to do a complete rebuild and trying to get some star in the draft, you know, this is more capital up front. You know, you get two 2024s, and then, you know, you have your own 2024 if you're not going to be a good team, which you likely are going
Not-
to finish in the bottom 10. You know, we're going to have a top 10 lottery pick. And so you get a lot of the fresh young talent, but you have the potential to turn into the next Detroit Pistons with all of these young guys who, you know, show a lot of potential, but, you know, might not be there for like years to come. And then you keep losing and losing. It's just demoralizing for the players. They probably start tuning things out. And so I think this would overall be not the best, but if you're trading Lowry, you want a really good young guy or a really good couple young guys and some first rounds to try and offset it so you can look for the future.
Yeah, out of the 3 trades, which all sucked, this one sucks the least. I agree with you on that. I still wouldn't do this, though. No way. It's just not like it's hard to quantify Lowry's value if you're not a Jazz fan because of what happened last year. No one thought we were going to be decent at all, and we turned out being halfway decent because of Lowry Markkanen's ascension. And I think he's just going to continue to ascend. He's 26, man. Like, he's just going to keep getting better. He really is. And like having a number 2 option on your team right now that you know could compete on a contending team, that's huge.
Thank you for watching another episode of the Full Court Press NBA podcast. For the full podcast, click the link below and subscribe for more hoops content.